In this video, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of living in Indianapolis. Every single place in the world is going to have its pros and everybody's going to be for living there, but every place also has some cons, some things that aren't so great, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Living in Indianapolis. I'm Jason Compton. This channel is all about living in Indianapolis and what it's like, to answer some questions about it that I hear from a lot of different people moving here, living here. They want to know the details of what it's like to live in Indianapolis. So if it's your first time here, make sure to subscribe, click the bell so you're notified every time I do a new video, which is every single week on Thursdays. So in this video, we're talking about pros and cons of living in Indianapolis. And I've got 3 pros, I've got 3 cons, and then I've got one that's a little bit on the fence. It depends on what your opinion is as to whether it's a pro or a con. And sometimes, honestly, it can change day to day, potentially, whether it's a pro or a con for you. So that's at the end, so stick around for that one. So let's start with the cons. If you're a good news, bad news type of person, when somebody's giving that to you, do you like the good news first or the bad news first? Well, I like the bad news first typically, and then give me the good news after that so I can feel a little bit better. So let's go with the cons first, and we'll get to the pros. Number 1 is that the weather here is a con. And I wouldn't say all of the weather, the spring, summer, fall, we can have phenomenal seasons as far as that's concerned, but there's no way around it. The winter here, it's not that great. But of course, the entire Midwest, the winter's not really all that great for the entire Midwest, almost anywhere you go. So the big thing though about Indianapolis and what makes the winters a little bit rough, December, January, February, and even leaking into November and March, is that it's cold. It's not incredibly snowy. We don't get a lot of snow like a lot of people think, but as far as winter activities outside, Indianapolis is lacking. If you go to a place like Madison, Wisconsin, that's a place that has fantastic summers, but their winters are really harsh. But the people there embrace their winter and they have a lot to do in the winter. Indianapolis, it's not phenomenal. A lot of your activities turn inside, and we do have activities that you can do on the inside, places to go, things to see. But as far as outside activities are concerned, we don't have mountains. If you go into southern Indiana, it is hillier, amazingly. I mean, it's dramatically hillier. And funny as it sounds, we actually have a couple of ski, I wouldn't call them resorts, but places that you can go ski in the winter. Now, if you're a hardcore skier, not going to be fantastic at all. But if you're a beginning skier, pretty good place to learn before you head out west to a place like Colorado or Utah or Washington or California, something like that. But the snow is artificial, not fantastic. The runs aren't very long. But outside of that, it's hard for us to embrace things outside during the winter in Indianapolis. And then, of course, what about those pesky tornadoes? We do have tornadoes in Indianapolis and Indiana in general. Now, on average, we only get about 22 tornadoes a year. And I know you think, oh, well, only 22 tornadoes in a year. That's still 22 tornadoes. But when you compare it to some other places, like Oklahoma, as an example, there's 52 on average tornadoes a year there in that state. And then Texas, 126 tornadoes in a year. Now, Indiana, is it part of Tornado Alley? That's actually debatable. Really, I think officially it's not, but sometimes it's included in that mix with some other Midwestern states. But we do get tornadoes here in Indiana, and of course that's a negative, but they don't occur every single day. They only really occur most of the time in the spring and the summer, and when they do occur, they tend to happen in bunches, and they're kind of small. We don't have these gigantic F5 tornadoes all the time. Those are actually really quite rare. Most of the time they're small F1 tornadoes, and we hope that they hit unpopulated areas, which they usually do, but occasionally they'll hit a place and cause some catastrophic damage in a more populated area. Another con, just like any big city, is the traffic. Now, it's not traffic that you would find in some other cities, some really super compact cities like New York City, or even Seattle or San Francisco, or a big city like Chicago. Any place like that, they're going to have just heinous traffic. And Indianapolis is hit and miss, but it does get bad during the rush hour in the morning, and then of course in the evening, and then sometimes just randomly throughout the day, you'll be on the highway thinking, what in the world? Why is the traffic so bad? It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or it's 10 in the morning. How could this possibly be? Now, Indianapolis is 17th largest city in the country as far as population is concerned. And when you get into the suburbs, some of the places surrounding Indianapolis, it reaches close to 2.5 million people, and it's very spread out. So the sheer distance sometimes that you have to travel from one side of town to the other, that's going to take some time just under really good conditions, traffic conditions. But you throw in a little bit of traffic, and suddenly now a 30 or 45-minute drive, as an example, going from Fishers, Indiana to the airport, the international airport in Indianapolis. That's a solid 40-minute drive, definitely. But you add some traffic in, it'll add 15, 20 minutes, maybe sometimes a little bit worse as far as the time's concerned on your drive. If you work in any of the surrounding areas of Indianapolis and you work downtown, it is going to be a struggle for you. You are going to hit traffic. People are coming into town during the morning rush hour, and they're leaving town a lot of times during the evening. So it's going to be heavy. It's going to add 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. It depends on the weather, depends on accidents. Just like it does in any big city, the traffic is not fantastic. Which kind of leads into another con, is that Indianapolis has public transportation, as in a city bus, and some additional pieces of public transportation, but it is not absolutely fantastic. If you get into New York City and some of these other huge cities in the country, they do a much better job with their public transportation. Indianapolis, if you live here, you're very likely going to have to drive. You'll have to have your own car, own your own car, lease your own car. You can take Uber and Lyft. Uber and Lyft are, of course, very, very big here in Indianapolis, and people use them a lot. My wife and I use Uber and Lyft quite a bit. So you will be driving a considerable amount here. And it leads us to another con. Indianapolis is a big city, but it's not Chicago. It's a big city, but it does sleep. Chicago, New York City, these are the cities that don't sleep. So if you're looking for things that are happening every single hour of the day, every single day of the week, Indy is not going to be as fast-paced for you as you might like. All right, so let's stop beating up on Indianapolis here now. I don't like to beat up on the city that I've lived in for so long, although I know it has the cons, but there are a lot of pros too. So let's focus on a few of those. Number one, cost of living and the affordability of housing. Indianapolis actually ranks as the 48th cheapest city or least expensive city to live in the country. That means there's 47 other cities in the country that are considered to be more expensive to live in. And most of that comes from the cost of housing, for sure. Now, that's not too bad for a city that ranks the 17th largest in the country, and then close to 2.5 million people whenever you get to the outskirts. Now, that pushes its population compared to other cities in the country down a little bit once you include all of the suburbs and the cities that surround it. But 48th city in the country as far as affordability and cost of living is concerned. Now, I've got another video that gets into the details of the cost of living and why it is where it is, and a little bit more about the housing costs. And that's for purchasing and for rentals, both. They're both relatively cheap when you compare it to other cities in the country. So let's get into another pro. Indianapolis has some of the best suburbs in the country. Now, according to niche.com, Carmel, Indiana, on the north side of Indianapolis, is the #1 ranked suburb, at least this is in 2019, in the country. And Fishers, Indiana, which is just next door to the east, ranks at number 16. And Money Magazine has Fishers ranked at number 3. Now, why are they ranked so high? Well, there's a number of different things. And of course, it's a little bit subjective as to why they are ranked there, but they put some hard numbers to help rank these cities and suburbs against one another. And that's low crime rate. You have phenomenal schools in every single case. You've got economic health, which is certainly high, which leads to more job opportunities, and it also boosts the median income, the household income, up. But Fishers and Carmel aren't the only suburbs around Indianapolis that are fantastic. There are others too, and they happen to be just a little bit smaller. You have Westfield on the north side, you have Noblesville on the north side, you have Zionsville on the northwest side, and then you can get over to the west side of Indianapolis where you have Brownsburg, Avon, Plainfield, and even down to the south where you get into Greenwood. So some phenomenal suburbs that surround Indianapolis, and they're very highly ranked by not just niche.com and Money Magazine, but by other sources as well. Another pro is I've certainly heard people say that Indianapolis feels like the biggest small town in the world. And there's really some truth to that because it does have a small town vibe in that the Midwest hospitality of people generally being friendly and courteous, it's not lost here at all. You absolutely have that attitude, and that's pretty different than some big cities across the country and across the world where it's just not as friendly. So you get that vibe along with big city amenities. You have plenty of sports. Indy is a huge sports town. You have museums, plenty of nightlife, you have plenty of restaurants, you get all of those things. And in fact, downtown Indianapolis is very compact and walkable. It's just not as exhausting and fast paced as it is to live in a place like New York City, where, as you agree, if you're just trying to survive a lot of times. Here, you can get away from all of that hustle whenever you feel like you need to and get some rest because you're tired of living in your city. Indianapolis offers you a break. All right, so there's some pros and cons for sure. And I told you there would be one last one that could be considered a pro in some people's mind and then a con in other people's mind. So if you don't know, Indianapolis and Indiana was one of just a couple of states that didn't follow daylight savings time up until 2006. And this was a really big deal in the mid-2000s. It was argued back and forth, but we finally jumped on the daylight savings wagon. So we're on the wagon now and been that way for 14 years. But one other argument was that who do we align with? We're really close to Chicago and they're on Central Time, but New York, we really want to be aligned with New York because it's kind of the hub of the United States and they're on Eastern Time. Well, Indianapolis sits pretty far west in the country and we ended up going with New York. So Indianapolis is on Eastern Time. And what that means, as far as a pro or a con is concerned, is that during the summer, it is light very late here. It doesn't get dark sometimes until after 10 o'clock at night. So just as an example, on the summer solstice, so around June 20th, June 21st, depending on the year, this year, for example, the sun sets on the summer solstice at 9:16 p.m. And most days in the summer, they're sunny. So you've got a clear sky. And when that sun finally dips below the horizon at 9:16, we've got a good 45 minutes of daylight left. And a little bit past that actually before it's really actually dark. So it doesn't get dark until after 10. And most of the summer, it's not dark until after 9. So if you have young kids, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there, try putting them to bed when there's 2 hours of daylight left. See how that works out. I can tell you from experience, it doesn't work out so well. And if you like to go to bed early, 8:30, 9, you better get some good blackout shades because it's going to be light. So I think you can gather for me that this is a bit of a con. I don't enjoy Eastern Time. I'd rather us be on Central Time and have it get dark at a more human hour so you can have a little nighttime before you go to bed, a time to unwind a little bit. It's hard to go from sunset right into bed. Very difficult to do, and it feels completely unnatural to me. So the Eastern Time Zone thing, that's a big argument one way or the other. So it makes it pretty interesting in the summers for sure. So there you have it, some pros and cons about living in Indianapolis, and I know there are more pros, and I know there are more cons too. So if you've got your own, whatever you think is a pro, what you think is a con, drop it in the comments below. We'll take a look at that. And until the next video, see you later.